And welcome one and all to our final night of our look at the Avatar. Latest book by Messianic Rabbi Jonathan Cahn. The Avatar, The Return of the Ancients and the Future of America. So we've been taking a journey, I call it an after Bible study, after the events of the Bible that wrap up with Revelation, courtesy of the Apostle John there on Patmos. Y'all remember that. Since then, a lot of stuff has happened. We've been looking at current events, bringing us right into 2024, and we'll be going from there into 2025, wrapping up tonight. Instead of our customary thing, we're out of his other devotional book. I've been sharing an opening scripture and some thoughts, and then closing with that. We actually have scriptures we're going to be looking at through the Avatar this night, so I'll forego the devotional before and after section just to get into the Avatar and close it out for the evening. We'll do this in three different sections. A section wrapping up 2024, then we'll hit the spring of 2025, and then we'll do a final for the end wrap up of all of that. So, but I do always still want to start with Scripture, so let's start in Scripture in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 8. Set the stage for us, and pretty much in all sections tonight, we're going to be in Kings. Mostly 2 Kings. We'll take a dip into 1 Kings in our middle section. So, quick recap. What we are looking at is the Bible template of where Ahab and Jezebel's events recorded in Scripture sort of set a template that's been carried out, and none of these are perfect lockstep examples, but very much a lot of similarities. Too much to where you start wondering about how much we can call it coincidence anymore. To where the template of Ahab and Jezebel was carried out in our lifetimes by President Bill and Hillary Clinton. And again, as I'm mentioning individuals, we're not hyper-focusing on them. They're humans just like us. It's more about the spiritual impact and the biblical record, and seeing that as we consider these things. So Ahab and Jezebel, they had a son named Joram. His template from the Bible carried out in modern days by President Barack Obama. Ahab and Jezebel also had a daughter named Athaliah. Her biblical template being carried out in our day and time by Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, she was married off as the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, Jezebel being a princess herself from Phoenicia, from the Baal worshiping, her dad Ethbaal was a Baal worshiping king there. So she brought that over to Israel. Thank you very much, Ahab, for that. Their daughter over in Israel, 10 tribes in the north in that kingdom, their daughter was married off to the prince down in Judah, 2 tribes in the south in that kingdom, and that's where Jerusalem is, the temple, throne of David, and all of that. In fact, these are on the throne are the direct descendants of David. Jehoshaphat, good king, his son Jehoram in Judah married off to Athaliah, daughter of Ahab and Jezebel. Her husband Jehoram, his Bible template being carried out in our lifetimes by President Joe Biden. Their administration together, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, very much mimicking the reign of Jehoram and his wife Athaliah. Well, Jehoram has a son, Ahaziah, who rules very briefly, and his name and characteristics very much akin to Joe Biden's son, Hunter. But then they're all removed from the picture, and then Athaliah is raised to the forefront. And we saw that with the election we just looked at. So that's all on the side of the influence of Ahab and Jezebel. In fact, 2 Kings chapter 8 will read about just that, about Jehoram's reign and the impact of his wife. 2 Kings chapter 8, let's pick up in verse 18. Now keep in mind, this is a descendant of David on the throne of David in Solomon's temple in Jerusalem, and it says this about him. He, in 2 Kings 8:18, he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, just as the house of Ahab had done. For Ahab's daughter was his wife, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord. However, the Lord did not want to destroy Judah for the sake of David his servant, since he had promised him to give him a lamp through his sons always. So that's what we're seeing take place here, and kind of setting the stage here. So Jehoram gets taken out of the picture, and Ahaziah gets taken out of the picture. Athaliah rises up now. And so that's all the influence from the Ahab and Jezebel side of things, the anti-God side of things, even though king of the Lord's people in Israel. So what do we have to counter that? Well, the Lord raises up, and this is where we'll be spending our time looking in 2 Kings and dipping into 1 Kings in these other sections. The Lord raises up a man named Jehu. And Jehu takes care of business and deals with the house of Ahab and many of its members. And we've seen a lot of that in our study, and we'll be wrapping that up this evening. And then Jehu's temple, of course, being carried out by President Donald Trump. And again, with all these individuals, we're not demonizing any human beings on the side acting contrary to God. We're not putting on a pedestal anyone carrying out the things that are on the side of God. It's not about the humans, it's about the spiritual impact at work here. So with that being said, the state of affairs in the world, let me share the screen here. So we left off with the aftermath of the election in November of 2024. So that's where we'll be picking up after that, winding up the year 2024. So let's see here. So we left off with the price tag of the election. Final price tag on the election was almost $11 billion. So we saw that. Yikes. So some other things that have happened to wind up the year. We have the takeover of Syria. By a man who, as I've mentioned before, I have not yet ruled out as the Antichrist. Certainly doesn't have to be, and there's certainly a lot of Antichrist criteria he has not lived up to just yet, but nothing that I've seen so far has disproven him to be. So just something to keep an eye out for. His name is Al-Shara. His war name is Al-Julani. We used to have a $10 million bounty on his head, but we said, never mind, you're good. And so, yeah. And he comes from Saudi Arabia, just like the bin Ladens do. And I know Saudi Arabia is big, but that's also where we first encounter the Amalekites, et cetera, et cetera. Amalekites from the Psalms might be one of the 10 nations that the Antichrist comes out of. So just some thoughts there. Yes, there's a lot of a big deal with Syria. We talked about that at the time, and he's still got ties to Afghanistan. And all the things that are coming out of there. Obama's son, Osama bin Laden's son, Hamza, doing things there. Brother Howard shared some things out of Daniel we talked about. So we looked at quite a few things when all that went down. It was quite a big deal. And so with all that, let's see. Here we go. So in other national news, there's a nation north of us called Canada. Oh, Canada, yes. So there's a little tidbit about Canada that Jonathan Kahn mentions here, just talking about the state of affairs of the Western world and where we had gotten to. So here's this thought. So we've talked about the gods from Mesopotamia, the ancient gods, lowercase g, the demons, Baal, Inanna, Ishtar, and Molech. Baal being the Lord, the one trying to usurp God, Ishtar, Inanna, all the sexual deviance, and then Molech, the child sacrifice, abortion, etc. So here's a thought here. As for Molech, though Roe v. Wade was overturned, the war against innocent life only intensified. Those advocating for the killing of the unborn now did so all the more openly and brazenly. They now sought to remove all hedges and restraints that might hinder the practice or its expansion. In their zeal, they now began crossing the line into the realm of infanticide, advocating babies born alive in a failed abortion attempt should not be saved but left to die. Here's the thing, Molech's work was not limited to the unborn. Now, as I share some thoughts from him, feel free to disagree with him on the points he makes or scriptural connections he tries to make with current events. Just sharing these things to get our spiritual juices flowing, kind of be thinking and considering, being open-minded to different things. As I mentioned, I don't agree with him on absolutely everything. And as anyone has any thoughts or questions as things come up, please let me know. But Molech's work, he says, was not limited to the unborn. This is where we'll bring Canada in. There were other ways to kill. So the number of those contemplating suicide, attempting it, or committing it now reached epidemic proportions. The young were especially prone to contemplate self-destruction. And it wasn't only the young who were in danger, but the old. The same culture that devalued human life at its beginning would do so at its end. Once condemned in Western culture as murder, euthanasia was increasingly legitimized, legalized, and spreading. In this, Canada. now offered a dramatic glimpse into America's future. This article from December 12th, 2024, assisted dying now accounts for 1 in 20 Canada deaths. Yeah. In 1 year's time, the number of its citizens legally put to death had exceeded 10,000. Where the gods reign, death also reigns. Remember, these spiritual forces at work are anti-God. God is the God and author of life, God of life, author of life. So they are anti-life. They are not in favor of anyone. The opposite of the creator is the destroyer. So they are on a mission to destroy. They'll use and abuse anyone along their way, make them feel they're their buddy, whatever, but they're on a destruction mission. And so there's an example of that there. Also in December, and this is as we'll be winding the year up here. Let's see. Another thought over here. 49. Yeah. Again, back to Athaliah in America. So Athaliah, she was, as we read, was the prominent member of her husband's government. She was zealously championing the worship of Baal. Undoubtedly, her influence caused temples and shrines of Baal to be built in Jehoram's kingdom, upon which sacrifice of children would be performed. So to the American Athaliah would become the most prominent member of the Biden administration, zealously championing the killing of the unborn. There can be no doubt Queen Athaliah would have entered the temples and shrines of Baal, worshipped at the altars, and so we see the similar thing with Kamala Harris. So with that, what we've seen is the war to promote abortion and to act against anything contrary to abortion, like pregnancy crisis centers and those offering help and assistance alternatives to abortion. This war would involve, and we probably remember these from the headlines, would involve federal agents raiding the home of a pro-life father with pointed guns and apprehending him in front of his horrified family. It would involve the arrest of pro-life grandmothers for their peaceful resistance against the killing of the unborn. The government would then seek to sentence them to years in prison. At the same time, and this brings us to December 20th of 24, for this one here. Sure. Biden administration accused of failure to prosecute church attacks, one-sided FACE Act enforcement. So when pro-life churches and ministries were vandalized, the administration would do next to nothing to protect them or to prosecute their attackers. So that was the state of affairs winding down in December. Does anyone have any memories of this kind of being the state of affairs, these kind of things going on then, or kind of remembering that experience? Yeah, Sister Diana.
There was a father of several children who had, his wife had adopted several more children. They had a very large family. And he was arrested, tossed in jail. There's his whole family, a family of like 10.
Yeah.
Doing without him. Well, he's right in jail for doing nothing more than praying in front of the abortion clinic.
Yep.
Horrifying.
Absolutely. And this is the government of America. America that was, founded on Judeo-Christian principles and the protection of life and all that stuff and freedom. Last event that happened in December, we have New Year's Eve, New Orleans. The guy with the truck, that's the flag that was on his truck. ISIS flag. He went in and he barreled through the crowds and brought out his guns and started shooting everyone, and he went down fighting. And so that was that. And then, the lightning strike. We talked about that a little bit, but so so that brings us out of 2024, and we'll close 2024 on that. Does anyone have any questions, any reactions, any thoughts on what we have looked at, bringing us to close out 2024 up to this point? All good? Then 2024 is a wrap. And we will close that out and wake up, and it'll be 2025.